I don't know if Kamala Harris is the border czar or not, to be quite honest. It's very interesting. Let's take a look at the first article here. This is from Axios. This came out yesterday or 2 days ago. Harris border confusion haunts her new campaign. If we could go to the next slide real quick. This is a section of the article where it talks about Kamala Harris being the border czar. It says the border czar narrative has stuck, especially in conservative circles, and calls mounted in the spring of 2021 for Kamala Harris to visit the border. So it's been reported and then not reported that Kamala Harris is the border czar, is not the border czar. It's very interesting because she doesn't want to take acceptance for the duties and the failure of what's going on at the border. Yet here's a video of Joe Biden acknowledging that she was put in charge of the border.
Okay.
Play this video if we could.
I've asked her, the VP, today, because she's the most qualified person to do it, to lead our efforts with Mexico and the Northern Triangle and the countries that help us. We're going to need help in stemming the movement of so many folks, stemming the migration to our southern border.
So while not using the actual term border czar, he lists that Kamala Harris is going to be helping with underdeveloped countries that are sending their migrant citizens here to our country. She's going to work with those countries to stop it. Clearly, judging by the immigration numbers, that never happened. Let's take a look. I actually asked, this is Grok from Twitter.
Twitter's AI, Rob?
Yeah, Twitter's AI, because, Gemini's is kind of woke. That's the Google version.
Yeah.
Even ChatGPT is kind of woke. So I said, hey, was Kamala Harris the border czar? And then Grok got all smarmy on me. AI all of a sudden having a personality. Oh, the infamous border czar title. In March of 2021, President Joe Biden tasked Vice President Kamala Harris with addressing the root causes that make people migrate to the United States from Central America. Okay, let's go to the next. So this is them saying, no, she wasn't the border czar. Oh, that was supposed to be the one before. I'm sorry, Kelly. We'll get to that. Can we go to the other Grok slide? Because I asked Grok, I go, okay, was Kamala Harris the border czar? It said no. So I said, hey, what are the duties of the border czar? And it says, number one, coordinate with the private sector, civil society, and members of Congress to address the root causes of migration. Lead diplomatic efforts with Mexico and Northern Triangle countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, to stem migration to the U.S. southern border. So while she was never actually given the title of border czar, the Grok AI acknowledges and says, well, she wasn't given the title of border czar, but she was given these duties to be the border czar. And then you ask Grok, what are the actual duties of the border czar? And it lists exactly the duties what it said before that Kamala Harris is not supposed to be doing because she's not the border czar. This is gaslighting at its finest. They're sitting here and they're telling us she wasn't this when all of the reports indicate that she was. In fact, if we could go back to the second part of the Axios article, Kelly.
That one?
This is the second part of Axios where they write this whole article about how Republicans and right-wing media have labeled Kamala Harris the border czar. Read the editor's note at the bottom. Editor's note. This article has been updated and clarified to note that Axios was among the news outlets that incorrectly labeled Harris as the border czar. You gotta be fucking kidding me at this point. Like, are we retarded as a society to believe this bullshit? Because there are people that are believing it. If we could go to a clip, Kelly, I'm sorry.
And then we'll go to Roger.
Yeah, I want Roger to see this. Roger, here's a clip of the media. This is fantastic. Charlie Kirk tweeted this. I don't know who put this together, but this is a side-by-side comparison over the years of the media both stating that Kamala Harris is the border czar and then the same media outlet stating no, she's not.
Okay, go ahead, Kel.
That's great. Quote unquote border czar. Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People are going to have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
Yeah. I think we've seen 40 seconds of the hypocrisy, so I apologize for the feisty language, but Mr. Stone, I'd love to hear your input on this exact gaslighting situation.
This is really clear. Just remove the word czar.
Yeah.
He put her in charge of the border. At his press conference just before he shot the tubes, when he was still fighting for survival, they decided to throw him out there to do a press conference to see if he could perform well enough to survive. If we go back and look at it, he says, I put Kamala in charge of the border and she's doing a great job. You can find that bite.
Oh, wow.
So she's not going to be able to walk away from that. But whether she's the border czar or not, this is the Biden-Harris administration. So when Joe Biden says, as he did in his address from the Oval Office, Joe Biden, or whoever that was, he says border crossings today are lower than at any point during the previous administration. That's just a lie. That's just a flat out lie. So she can't walk away from the Biden-Harris record on the border, whether she had the title czar, which I think some reporter picked that out of the air. It's not an unfair depiction. If you're in charge of something, well, you're the czar. You could have called her the border head, but then head and Kamala Harris, I'm not sure you want to go there.
So Roger, so let me ask you a question though. Our viewers, they get it. They're awake. They're not woke, and they're not brainwashed sheep. I mean, there are some haters in there, and you guys know who you are. But I think the reason that Mayorkas, in conjunction with the Biden administration, has obviously let the border be wide open, which is still completely wide open. We have a guy that works here at Valuetainment, Roger, whose friend said that the flight from Argentina was playing who in the finals? Argentina and Peru or
Colombia?
Colombia. Sorry, thanks, Cal. This friend, Colombian, Roger, it was too expensive for him to fly to Miami. You know what he did? He flew to Mexico, walked through the border, and got a flight to there, and it was
a football match.
To go watch a football match. I'm not even trying to be funny. So Roger, it's been a purposeful thing to leave it open. They don't care about the drugs, the fentanyl, the murder, the sexual assault. I don't want to say the R word to our citizens, our females. Is the main reason for it, Roger, to actually make to switch the election? Because I know they're going to cheat, because Ben Carson was on Tucker last night, and he said he has friends in Baltimore that went to go vote, and they were like, hey, do you want my ID? Like, no, hell no. We don't even want your ID. We don't need your ID. Is that the tactic? Is that the ploy?
Yeah, I think there's an effort to change the makeup of the American electorate. If you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles here in Florida right now, and you say, I want to register to vote, they will have you fill out a form. No one asks you for proof of citizenship. No one asks you for a birth certificate. Nobody even asks you for a photo ID. You just fill it in, you mail it out, and they will mail you a ballot, or you can show up at the polls and vote.
I literally just did it like 3 months ago. Didn't ask for anything. I brought all my papers because I'm a citizen, I'm a responsible citizen. I brought everything. And I just go up to the counter and it's like, what's your name? They took a picture and they gave me a license.
How's that going to change, Roger? Like, how is that possible? How are we not letting it happen? Like, how are we letting it happen? Because and then I don't want to hear any shit from the Republicans when they get their asses whooped and they're like, how the hell did Joe Biden get 81 million votes?
Well, I think the short answer is we are dealing with it now, finally. In other words, under the last 3 years, under leadership of the Republican National Committee, nothing was being done. So take the Florida Republican Assembly, excellent volunteer organization, conservative Republicans. They develop a pretty sophisticated program. They take all 15 million Florida voters, they run it through this program, and they find that 1 million of them are registered at addresses where the post office certifies that it's not deliverable. Well, that means one of several things. The person has died, the person moved out of state, they're registered to a vacant lot, they're registered to a building that is not a residential building, and therefore they never existed to begin with. And some are registered to post office boxes, which is specifically illegal in Florida, but they're still on the voting rolls. So this idea that Florida, which is going to be a key state here, and much closer than people think, because they have put abortion and the legalization of cannabis on the ballot as constitutional amendments, which pulls out a lot of Democrats and younger voters. I'll be voting for one of those two. That is, I think, designed to to bring out Democrat voters. Florida, we have a warped view because of the 22 election. The hurricane is a huge contributor to DeSantis's big win. Now, I think he would have won, but I think he would have won by 5. He won by 22 because he dominated the news for the final 3 weeks over his, I think, very capable administration of the response to the hurricane. But for people to think that Florida is safe, Florida is not safe. Florida will be a battle. Trump will win. But it'll be closer than expected. And the reason for that is the voting lists in Florida are not clean. They're not clean.
Rob, do you still have more?
No, I mean, I think we've pretty much proven the point that Kamala Harris, whether we call her the czar or not, she was clearly in charge of the border. The border has been a deliberate catastrophe based on trying to bring people into this country to sway an election. So what they have shown, the party that sits here and criticizes Donald Trump, criticizes Republicans, criticizes MAGA, and says they're the ones who are a threat to democracy. Look what they are doing right now with the anointed nominee of Kamala Harris. She is a god in the Democratic Party. Who's going to go to the convention? They're going to have an open convention with her after everything that's been going on over the past 2 weeks since Biden dropped out.
And it's pretty wild, Roger. And we just talked about this before we came in here. The ex-president of the United States, Donald Trump, a couple weeks ago, they tried to kill him. They tried to murder him. That's not even the talk of the town right now. And for the FBI director, Christopher Wray, that little rat, that scumbag deep state operative establishment, he drives me nuts when I see his face, Alejandro Mayorkas, all them. For him to float this, I don't know, it might be shrapnel, this whole bullshit. That isn't, like, that's yesterday's news right now. What the main thing, and you nailed it, is Kamala. That's all they care about.
And also, he suddenly spits out that, well, we know that the guy they claim is the shooter. I'm not even sure about that.
I don't even think he got a shot off.
But he was researching Lee Harvey Oswald's role in the Kennedy assassination online. He looked up how many feet Oswald was from Kennedy. Well, wait a minute. They told us before that his entire online history had been wiped. So which is it? Right. Which is it?
Yeah.
It's to create the idea that he's the
lone wolf guy.
Right.
Yeah, Rob, go ahead, then I'll go.
Patsy.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Beginning.
But it's very interesting because he's 22 years old?
20.
And has zero presence on any type of social media.
What does that say about him?
That's so weird to me, and B, unlike every other child of that generation. So for me, I have friends who have kids that are that age. So I know people that are on the internet at that age. For him to have zero digital footprint it just leads to the more suspicious questions. But back to what you were saying, Vinny, about everything that's being reported about Kamala and what you spoke about, Mr. Stone, earlier as well. It's very interesting that 4 weeks ago, before the Trump assassination, everything was Biden. Cognitive decline. Then it became Trump assassination. Not even a second clap. Kamala. We're not talking about the Trump assassination. We're not talking about the shooter anymore. We're not talking about Biden's cognitive decline, who's running the country. Now the focus is on the money that's going to be going to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris as a Democratic nominee. It's a weird, quick news cycle to try and get us to forget what actually has happened over the past month. And these are historical events that have never happened in history before, except for when you go back to 1963.
Yeah. Go ahead, Roger.
Look, I think this is a very key point. Trump has a very successful convention. So between the assassination, which evokes enormous public sympathy for him, as it should, because somebody tried to kill him, and a very successful convention, the very next day, CrowdStrikes, an internet security firm, claims that some complete computer glitch shut down virtually every airline, every railroad, every bank. Many retail people are stranded. It dominates the news cycle. Now, who is CrowdStrike? Why, that's the company in my trial that forced the FBI, first of all, to admit they never inspected the computer servers at the DNC, and then they had a report which the judge would not allow my defense attorneys to have in my trial, which allegedly proved that the Russians had hacked the DNC and that information had somehow gotten to WikiLeaks. 2 years later, Sean Henry, who's the head of cybersecurity for CrowdStrike, His previous job was as Robert Mueller's deputy at the FBI. How coincidental.
Weird.
Wow.
He admits under oath before the House Intelligence Committee that report was just a draft and that it included no proof whatsoever that the Russians hacked the Democrat National Committee. Now, at my trial, I wanted to bring Bill Binney, who had been the head of cybersecurity for the CIA, as a witness and present forensic evidence in which I could have proved that there was no hack of the DNC by anybody, never mind the Russians. Of course, the judge would not allow that. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy realist. The shutdown by CrowdStrikes the day after the Republican National Convention was designed completely to change the news narrative, to get Trump's attempted assassination and the successful convention out of the news cycle.
Holy crap.
Yeah. I was going to say they found a sliver of social media presence for the shooter.
Yeah.
Shooter.
Yeah.
Gab, because the thing is that, and this proves that everything was wiped. He probably had a social presence. Yeah. And Gab, there's a freedom company. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It was like
Twitter, right?
Yeah, it's like Twitter, but it was like the first free speech alternative to Twitter. They found his profile, and the owner and founder of it, like, he posted all the comments that he made. And guess what? Supports Joe Biden, supported the lockdowns, supported all the Democratic talking points, and he has all the receipts for it.
Let me say something. If this was a movie, okay, guess what I would say? Oh, the government, CIA, brainwashed that kid. He sat on the roof. And mind you, I saw somebody yesterday, Roger, who was in the prone position where this kid supposedly was. He wasn't on the peak of this sloped roof. He was at the level. And Raj, they got down and put a camera in front of the face. You can't even see over this thing. So there was no line of sight to Trump. If I had to guess, whoever was on that water tower, because there's a huge ladder going down the backside that you could do it and leave. Everybody's worrying about that pandemonium. Nobody's checking the water tower. This is easy money. If this was a movie, I would have been like, oh, that's the patsy, that's the shooter. If the FBI and the Secret Service are all pointing fingers, nobody gets blamed because, Roger, if he dies, besides where the country would be in freaking shambles right now, once we got everything in order, what happens? The Secret Service, Kim Cheadle steps down, and it's the end of the story. She doesn't go to prison. That's
right.
She just goes, I effed up. The buck stops for me. I apologize. They're not going to get her for orchestrating it.
Two things quickly.
Yeah.
Does anybody else find it weird that this kid that was, okay, so they found his social media presence. So it's a kid that was pro-lockdowns, pro-COVID-19 mask mandates, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
A guy that's exhibiting liberal viewpoints is posting those things on Gab. I didn't even know Gab existed. So even that's weird. Why would he be posting that stuff on, like, Gab when
you
he's
should be out there? Yeah.
And then the other question I had for you, Mr. Stone, you were 9 or 10 years old when President Kennedy was assassinated?
That's about right.
What? I know that's a long time to think back to, but what was the state of the country in the moments, the days, the weeks after Kennedy's assassination? Because for me, it felt like when I've said this before, it felt like the Trump assassination, it felt like 9/11 to me, where I watched the planes hit those buildings, but it still didn't feel real. And watching the Trump assassination, to me, it still feels like I'm in shock over it, that this guy was able to survive miraculously, 3 bullets coming within millimeters of his head. And the chaos that could have erupted, but what was it like in 63 after Kennedy gets assassinated?
The entire country was in a state of both shock and mourning. I remember reading the New York Daily News and looking at the pictures of the presidential funeral where John Kennedy is saluting his father in the case. And look, I come from a Republican family, but I was in tears. Mm-hmm. I was in tears. I remember it very, very specifically. Kennedy was beloved as a president, but he had done nothing whatsoever on civil rights in his 3 years. Nothing. After making huge promises in 1960, and he was not a sure bet for re-election. He was going to have a competitive campaign for re-election. I just find it interesting. First of all, I like Gab. I'm on Gab. I like Gab. If they've shut you off every place else, and many of my friends are still censored in other places, you can go to Gab. It's lively. There's a lot of anti-Semitism there that I don't like, but nobody forces you to read it, and I certainly don't repost it. It is a free speech platform. There's a lot of repugnant views there, but you can say whatever you want and think that's important. But in this particular case, where does a 20-year-old get these skills? the skills to hook up a detonation to explosives in his car, the skills to shoot with this kind
with no
of
sight, with no scope,
with this kind of accuracy.
Fly a drone.
Very, very hard to believe.
Yeah.
Now, Senator Ron Johnson has said that a government briefing indicates to him that there may have been more than one shooter. But the most outrageous thing, we've all seen this, are the people in the video saying, look, on the roof, a man with a gun, right there, over there. And nothing happens.
Nothing.
That's the strangest thing.
Yeah, that's called a stand down. Go ahead, Brendan, because I want to go to actually your story next.
Okay. So FBI. So how is it that the FBI comes in, locks the place down, doesn't even let Congress people in, and then the site's just clean within 10 days? Like we saw the videos of them hosing off the roof, like breaking down the stands. Like what's up with that? I've never.
Same way they hosed out JFK's limousine before anybody could examine it. It was taken off and completely hosed down.
It's not how you treat a crime scene. So like, how's anybody in the public acting like that's normal?
Especially the biggest crime scene in United States history.
Yeah.
When was another president assassinated
63.
live on camera in front of the entire world to see? I know the footage didn't come out for years, almost 12 years later, but that was the biggest crime that ever happened in American history, and they scrubbed the limo just like they scrubbed the rooftop after what could be the next biggest.
Right.
And there's an additional film we haven't seen yet. So first of all, the famous Zapp Brother film, which even I got Arlen Specter, who was the chief counsel for the Warren Commission, to admit was missing frames. So the government sent it to Kodak in Rochester for processing.
Yeah.
And when it came back, it had been changed. But there's also a man named Nix. He's deceased, but his family, his estate, is still fighting with the government for release of his video. The government has never been willing to release it. The point, I guess, here is that it was in 1963. We're still not exactly sure what happened. I mean, I put forward in my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, the case against LBJ, a pretty good, compelling case using eyewitness evidence, fingerprint evidence, deep Texas politics. Others have other theories. Some people think it was the CIA. They're not wrong. The CIA is involved, but it's not solely the CIA. Others say it was organized crime. They're not wrong either. Now you go to Ronald Reagan, who they tried to kill in 1981. They've never released the report on the investigation into Reagan's murder. But here's what we do know. John Hinckley Jr., who was convicted of trying to kill Kennedy, is crouching in front of Reagan. He gets off 4 bullets. All 4 bullets are accounted for. None of them hit Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was hit from behind and above. Oh. That is a point that Bill O'Reilly seems to have missed in his book.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's a lot of anomalies there. When they get Reagan, first of all, Reagan's missing for 15 minutes. James Brady, his press secretary, who was shot in the head, he gets to George Washington Hospital 15 minutes before Reagan. Where is Reagan?
Wow.
The presidential limousine has left the Hilton, but where is Reagan? My sources for a book I'm working on tell me that there's a struggle within the Secret Service because some want to take him to Bethesda Medical Center, while others want to take him to GW Hospital, which is much closer. Oh. He goes to GW Hospital. When he gets there, they X-ray him and they cannot find a bullet.
What?
So he has a puncture wound. He's bleeding, but they can't find a bullet. They're about to sew him up, and when one of the doctors, who I have interviewed, said, this doesn't seem right. They open the incision and he does a manual inspection, a manual examination, and they come up with a flechette, which is about the size of a dime, and it's a projectile. It is shot from a gun that the CIA admitted in the church hearings they had developed specifically for the purposes of assassination. Jeez. You can go online and see pictures of Senator Tower and Senator Goldwater holding the gun up during the hearings, and it's noiseless. So I believe that Reagan was hit by a second shooter. Final point.
Do you attribute that to MK Ultra, like the thing where they have the patsy that's very visible and then somebody that's not super visible to the crowd?
Maybe. Hinckley has far more ties to Bush and the Bush family, as you will learn. But also Judy Woodruff, who's then on NBC, this has been scrubbed from the internet, but I have it, reports that there's a man who can be seen on a balcony above the entrance of the Hilton who appears to have a firearm. And indeed, when you look at the broader uncropped photos from that day, you can clearly see that man. So my next book, which is entitled Bushwhacked, the true story of the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan, will lay all of this out.
I can't wait. All right, so Raj, I want that book. Because I already have a signed one of the other book. I want that one too. What's up, everybody? Vincent O'Shaughnessy here. If you want to see me and the entire Valuetainment crew, we will be at the Vault Conference September 4th through the 7th at the Palm Beach Convention Center, hosted by none other than Patrick Bet-David and featuring Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Guys, this is the place to be. If you are an entrepreneur and you want to level up, do not miss this opportunity. This is the best place to network. If you want tickets, go to thevaultconference.com. Do not waste time. This thing is going to sell out, and I will see you guys there. Peace and love. So if you like this clip, click right here. And if you want to see more like it, click right here. Stay angry, Patriots.